Welcome back, everybody, to Behind the Caution Tape. I'm your host, CrashLit, and there is a lot to talk about that has been happening in USC in this past week. So let's get straight into it. So quick rundown, as usual, of what we're going to be talking about. We'll talk about some of the athletics facilities. Athletic Director Jen Cohen sent out an update on Friday in her State of Troy email. It's a monthly newsletter to the Trojan family. So we'll talk about what's going on there. Reggie Bush filed a lawsuit against USC, the Pac-12, and the NCAA. What is he seeking in that? Both men's and women's basketball dropped their schedules, so we'll get into notable matches there. How did lacrosse fare this past weekend? How did men's and women's golf do? How did men's and women's tennis do? How did women's soccer fare in their second weekend of Big Ten play? How did men's water polo do in the Overnight MPSF Invitational? How did football fare? And lastly, we'll close out with women's volleyball before I close out with my kind of what I'll be at this week and how I fared at the events I was at last week. So let's start with the first thing on the agenda, which is stadium and building updates. So facility updates. In her email, Jen Cohen confirmed that the baseball field would be ready for practice by the spring of 2025 and ready for games by the 2026 season with a capacity of 2,500 to 3,000 seats. That'll mean the Trojans are spending at least one more year playing off campus before they'll be back in Dado Field. As for Rawlinson Stadium, it is set to open in summer 2025. So that means next year women's soccer will be back there and ready to play on campus, but women's lacrosse will have one more season off campus. That capacity will be at 2,500 seats, and in addition, the new football performance center is set to be open in the summer of 2026. Next news is Reggie Bush files a lawsuit against USC, the Pac-12, and the NCAA. In this lawsuit, he's looking to seek compensation from the name, image, and likeness from when he was at USC from 2003 to 2005 when USC was able to profit a lot off of him. So we'll see where that goes, and I hope to have more updates on that next week. And please note that this is a separate lawsuit from the defamation suit he filed against the NCAA last year when he first started his campaign to get his Heisman back, which he eventually did get last year. And I guess the one question really that people are going to be wondering is, because he's named USC in this lawsuit, will that have implications on him being a tunnel captain at this point this year? It sounds like that has been something that has been in the talks, but we'll see where that goes from here. Especially, doesn't exactly seem like the greatest sign when you're suing someone, when you sue like that. I'm not saying I disagree with him. I just think it seems to kind of make that relationship kind of not the strongest when you'd be wanting to have someone do that. So we'll see what happens there. And in a statement from one of his attorneys, Evan Selleck said, and I quote, this case is not about seeking justice for Reggie Bush. It's about setting a precedent for the fair treatment of all college athletes. Our goal is to rectify this injustice and pave the way for a system where others are rightfully recognized, compensated, and treated fairly for their contributions. This came out this morning, so we will see what happens in the coming weeks and months. Before we get into schedules and recaps, both the men's and women's basketball teams dropped their schedules. The full schedules are out, so the Trojans know who, when, and where they will be playing all of their games, including their Big Ten slates. And notable non-conference matchups for the men's team will include Cal, which is part of a home-and-home series. The Golden Bears come to Galen this winter, and then the Trojans will make the return trip out to Berkeley next year. And then St. Mary's, and then ASU or New Mexico in the Acresier Classic. Those are kind of some of the big matches that are going to be for the Trojans. We will see those last two will be played in Palm Desert. For the women's, notable matches will be against Notre Dame at home and then at UConn. So aside from the UConn trip, both teams are staying within California for their non-conference schedule. And especially, I think this makes sense given they're going to be traveling a lot more during the when they get to conference play, especially with the Big Ten being in the Midwest and the Trojans being in LA. The other thing coming up before that on October 9th is the annual Trojan Hoopla event, which I think will be a great opportunity for fans to get to know the team, especially on the men's side, considering there are 16 new players and only 2 returners this year. Other than that, matches I'm definitely excited for on both sides are UCLA, and the men's one will be definitely interesting when Kobe Johnson, former Trojan Kobe Johnson, makes his return to Galen as a Bruin now. We will see how he is received by the Trojan family. Now on to the results of this week. We'll start with women's lacrosse, who had 2 matchups. They played Keio University, a team from Japan. I'm not sure what happened, was not able to find out. But I was able to find out through social media that they beat San Diego State later that day. So this all happened yesterday at Alexson Felix Field. Men's golf took 11th place out of 17 teams in the Tucker Invitational in Albuquerque, which is hosted by New Mexico. So they're next out at the Trinity Forest Invitational, hosted by SMU in Dallas. Women's golf won the Leadership in Golf Invitational last week in University Place, Washington. And their next event will be the Windy City Classic in Wilmette, Illinois. That'll be next week, September 30th and October 1st. That'll be hosted by Northwestern. Men's tennis has Peter Mack and Carl Lee currently taking part in the ITA All-American Championships in Tulsa that started 2 days ago and will run through Sunday. And then other than that, the team has the SoCal Intercollegiate Championship in San Diego coming up from Thursday to Sunday, and that'll be hosted by the University of San Diego. Women's tennis this week continues to take part in the ITA Championships, which are in Cary, North Carolina. So now let's get to soccer. Women's soccer went 2-0 last week. They got a 1-0 win against Purdue last Thursday, followed by a 2-0 win versus Indiana. Both those games were on the road. And Helena Sampaio had an insane goal early in the second half that put USC up 1-0 and basically ahead for good since the Hoosiers did not score. It was definitely really cool to see. I saw a clip of it on social media. Definitely worth checking it out. I think it's very fun to watch, very exciting. So definitely a lot of buzz around this team. They're 7-1-1 this year. They came in at 25th in the last week's rankings. They will probably move up. Those have not been published as of taping. So we will see where they land, but they are definitely on and up, and they are one of only 4 teams in the Big Ten to have won all 3 of their games. So they got all 9 points possible that team can get in their first game. So I think they're off to a very hot start. And I think they can be very dangerous in the Big Ten. So it's going to be very, very, very exciting to see what they do from here. So definitely looking forward to those games. They will be at home for the first time this year. As I mentioned earlier at the top of this, they won't be playing on campus, at least for 4 of their 6 home games. They'll have, when they play Ohio State and UCLA in October, those will be at the Coliseum, but their other 4 home games against Minnesota, Wisconsin, Oregon, and Penn State will all be off campus at Dignity Health Park in Carson, California. And that is where they will be playing this week. So they'll have their home matches. They play Minnesota on Thursday at 6 p.m. and then Wisconsin will visit them in Carson on Sunday at 11 a.m. in Dignity Health Sports Park. Both those matches can be streamed on Big Ten Plus. So I think this team's going to be very exciting. They're going to be very dangerous. Definitely looking forward to seeing how they do in the remainder of Big Ten play. Because right now they are off to a hot start. This team, and as I've said before, a lot of credit to them. They're playing most of their home games off campus, not to mention they have to do the travel of the Big Ten. So kudos to them, and it's just really impressive to see them just do very well. Like 7-1-1, that's really good, especially when you haven't even had a home game yet. So hats off to them. Can't wait to see them play soon. So make sure to get down if you can, to Dignity Health Park on Thursday at 6 or Sunday at 11 to see them play Minnesota and Wisconsin respectively. Now let's move on to men's water polo. Team went 3-1 in the Overnight MPSF Invitational up in Berkeley. Took second overall. Got a 1977 17-9 win on Friday night versus UC Davis, and then had a 12-11 win, 12-11 and 13-12 victories over Long Beach State and Stanford. Trojans taking down, or 13-12 against Long Beach State, and then 12-11 over Stanford. So busy day Saturday for the Trojans. So definitely a couple having a battle back at the end, but this team has shown its resilience for finally losing to, but then did lose to UCLA on yesterday afternoon in the final. And that'll definitely be a good game. Those will definitely be good games to see the Trojans and Bruins play. It's always a battle when these two teams square off against each other. And I think we'll see more of that this year too. So obviously that one didn't go the Trojans' way. But I was told by a parent, one of the parents that I talked to when I was at the home opener a couple weeks back, is to keep an eye out for when the Bruins visit USC on October 19th. That game is at 1 p.m. I think it'll be a real battle. Definitely, obviously, as we all know, USC and UCLA, it's pure hate. But at the same time, that hate just creates such great rivalries no matter what the sport. I've been to a ton. Football, basketball, volleyball, baseball, like, you name it. It's all just, it's great when you get to see the Trojans face the Bruins. So that is definitely going to be an exciting match. I am definitely planning on being at that one. As for USC, they are 10-1 on the season. They came in at number 3 in last week's poll. They will, I suspect, considering they took out number 2 Stanford, and this was their first loss of the season, that they will likely be moving to number 2. If they could have beat UCLA, I would have definitely pegged them for being number 1, but Bruins were number 1. They will probably remain. Trojans will probably move up to number 2. So if both teams can, win all their games, we could have a 1 versus 2 at the pool, which could be very, very exciting to watch. So I think that'll be definitely a good matchup. And now let's move on to football. I did not go to the big house for that game, but it was definitely still a lot of people pulled up to Rock Reilly's to watch it. So it's definitely a great game environment with the Trojan family. Definitely not as hostile as the big house. I was in touch with friends who did go to Michigan for that game, and they were telling me it was super hostile. It still looked like a fun time though, especially when they sang Mr. Brightside. I still think USC should try to find a way to have a song like that. I think someone once proposed we should sing Nothing But a G Thing, which makes sense considering the ties that both Dr. Dre and Snoop Dogg have to USC. But anyways, back to the game. I think it was definitely a good game overall. And sure, USC lost 27-24. And yes, Michigan did run the ball a lot and only had 32 passing yards. But I think overall, we should still be very positive about this as fans, because that's one of the toughest places in the country to play. Yeah, 110,000 people, the hostility of that place, it's like known. So, and I still think that they played them that close. It still shows how resilient this team was. And I think they can definitely still have a really special season. And yes, definitely there are areas that need to be worked. The offensive line definitely needs to get better. I think that certainly hurt Miller Moss at times. I think they can get better. Just definitely the O-line. It just takes time to gel. And you're just seeing, it's just been a bit of a revolving door of guys coming in, leaving. It's not like what the team had a few years ago when Reilly first came in, when he had an established line that was gelled, trusted each other, which is what helped the team get to that Pac-12 championship in his first year. You had Jonah Monheim, Justin Dedich, Andrew Voorhees, Brett Nealon, and Cortland Ford. And of those 5, only Monheim remains. So it's definitely still just a learning process. You're seeing them figuring it out, but I think they will. And I think they got time. And the other thing you have to consider is one loss isn't the killer that it was even like last year and before, because with the expanded playoff, you can afford to have a loss or 2, maybe even 3, depending on how you do. And if you can just get to that Big Ten game and win, if you win the Big Ten game, you're barring something crazy happening with like the group of 5, Big Ten conference champion is getting a bye into the quarterfinals of the CFP. So USC can afford a couple losses. And I think it's definitely just, we got to learn from it. Just got to come back, figure out. Definitely good opponent with Wisconsin. I think the defense was really good for most of the game. Definitely a couple big plays though. Didn't quite go their team's way, but I think overall, still definitely, I'm still very impressed with what Danton Lynn has been doing, and that was still definitely a great hire by Lincoln Riley. Then obviously, I think Miller Moss's pick, that was definitely tough to watch, especially because it got scored. But I still thought that was definitely a good play by. I still think that was still a good pass by Moss. It was just the Michigan defender. He ended up getting a good read on it, and it ended up hurting them. Just got a good read on it, got in front of it. It wasn't like one of those passes where it's kind of just chucked into just a random spot. I thought that was a well placed pass by Moss. So definitely a tough loss, obviously, but I think Trojans still can keep their. I think everyone in the Trojan family should keep their heads high. Yes, it sucked when we lost. Like, it's no secret. Rock and Reilly's, I was right there with everyone and was just absolutely devastated after Michigan, after the Trojans didn't get that convert on fourth down there at the end of the game and Michigan was able to kneel it out. I was devastated like everyone else. And I'm not saying you can't be bummed about it, but it was overall great game, tough environment. So I think the Trojans can still be proud of how they played and just know they got to do better on certain things. And especially I think there are areas, like I was saying, the O-line, just a couple of key plays on defense and just overall certain things. But I think the longer thing that's going to hurt this team is definitely the injuries that occurred with both Makai Lemon and Lake McCree out. And McCree, we'll see what happens to him. I mean, last year in the Holiday Bowl, he tore his ACL. So we'll see if he's able to come back. But I think that definitely is going to hurt the Trojans at tight end, considering how he's been this year. So we'll see what happens. But I think overall, this team is going to be able to bounce back. And I think we got a great chance to do that this week when the Trojans host Wisconsin for Parents Weekend. So I think, and this is going to be great for the Coliseum. It's going to be sold out. That Nebraska have sold out. But the other notable thing I'm sure most Trojan fans are aiming, return of former embattled defensive coordinator, Alex Grinch. So I think, obviously, Trojans definitely are happy that Grinch is gone. But I still think, obviously, he could still get his career back together. He had good success before he came to USC, and it just didn't work out right. I still think he needed to go. That said, we'll see how he does. He's just the safeties coach. He's not the defensive coordinator on Wisconsin. Luke Fickell hired him this offseason. So we will see how he does. He's definitely trying to rebound, so he's got a lot to prove. He's definitely coming in with a chip on his shoulder. But I still wouldn't be surprised if he's getting booed pretty hard by the Trojan family when the Badgers take the field. But overall, I think this is definitely a winnable game. Trojans did drop 2 spots in the latest AP poll to number 13 now. So I think they can definitely rebound and do better, but I think it's a game to just, get back on track. And like I said, you don't need to win. If you don't run the table, it's not the end of the world like it was. You can still make the playoff. You could still even get a bye and be the 2, 3, maybe even 1 seed. We'll just see kind of what happens from there, but it's definitely gonna be interesting to see how this whole playoff picture sort of sorts itself out into who's kind of contender, pretender. So we'll see. I think if USC had won this game, they could have been kind of made a statement early in it, but I still think they got plenty of time to recover. And like I said, Michigan's a good team, and I still think this USC football team can be very special. So now for our final segment before I get to my plan and my record, let's turn to USC women's volleyball. So last week, Trojans co-hosted the Trojans Line Invitational with Loyola Marymount. So Trojans definitely struggled at times, but came through 3 wins, a 3-2 win over LMU on Thursday night, 3-1 win over UNLV, and a 3-1 win over UC San Diego. Outside hitter Allie Batenhorst was named the most outstanding player, and setter Mia Tuaniga and defensive specialist Greg Gosnell were named to the all-tournament team as well for the Trojans Lions Invitational. Tuaniga also earning Big Ten Setter of the Week. And big congrats as well to freshman outside hitter Jaden Livings for earning Big Ten Freshman of the Week. Both Livings and Batenhorst were absolutely tearing it up. Ever since Livings got going, she played in the second match of the year, then as well against Utah State. But ever since she got to play against Ohio. Got the start against Ohio. She has been on a tear, had double digits every time she's been out since. 12 against Ohio, which was a couple weeks back, 16 versus LMU, 12 versus, and then 12 versus UNLV, 6 versus UC San Diego, but still definitely, still just, she's been impressive to watch. It's really fun to watch her. She absolutely dominates when she's on the court. Allie Batenhorst still continuing to impress. Has had no less, said has had 11 kills or more in every match this season, including 18 against UNLV, 18 against LMU, 15 against UNLV, and 17 versus UC San Diego. So definitely Trojans do have some big playmakers. Definitely still sometimes just not always being aggressive. I feel like kind of with these teams from like the mid-major, group of five, whatever you want to call it, they definitely tend to be a bit scrappier. So they're getting everything up. So it seems kind of like the power is kind of the way to put them away. So once the Trojans did that, you kind of saw them starting to separate themselves and win sets more comfortably than they were near the end of the match than they were at the start. But overall, it was definitely still very impressive to watch. And it's a lot of fun to watch this team. I was at all three of those matches. Definitely stressful at times, but great to see them get to 8-2. Moved up a spot from 20th. They're tied 20th now in the latest AVCA rankings. And now here comes their big challenge. So I think definitely, obviously, getting all those wins is good. But here's where you're going to get real tested as a team. You got Ohio State coming in for your Big Ten opener. It's at home. So it's at 7 p.m. on Friday. And I think it's definitely going to be an interesting game to kind of just see how USC does against the Buckeyes. You definitely got two big brands competing against each other. So I'm really excited for this one. It's going to be a great match. Definitely make it to that one if you can. It's going to be a great one. And then other than that, then they go play at number 2 Nebraska in Lincoln. So it'll be Allie Batenhorst's first time back since she graduated and transferred to SC. So I think that's definitely gonna be a great one to watch. Both those matches will be on the Big Ten Network, so I definitely want to try to watch that one if I can. It's gonna be a great weekend for the volleyball team. I think overall it's gonna definitely just be great, and I think really this team has a lot of potential. Definitely this Nebraska team is gonna be up with that matchup against Pitt, who just seems to be dominating everyone from what I've been reading and hearing. So we'll see how Nebraska does. Nebraska has faltered a couple of times, but I think overall the Trojans definitely have a chance. They've proven they can play high level. They just got to maintain that intensity the entire time. They can't get away with what they kind of at times were getting away with against teams like LMU, UNLV, UC San Diego, Ohio, Utah State. But overall, I think this team can be really, really good. They're projected 7th, but I still think they can do better. Especially how they started the season, just real hot, real solid against Pepperdine. I think they've proven they can compete with those top teams. I mean, you saw them compete with Creighton for a set. They took that first set before falling. So overall, I think this is going to be a very interesting weekend for this team. So I'm really excited to see what comes of it. Now, finally, before we close out, I'm going to talk about what I'll be at this week and how I did. So last week, I just went to I watched the football game, but as you guys know, I don't count games I watch on TV. I have to be physically there for it to count on my record. So I went 3-0 at games I was at this week. There were the 3 volleyball matches I just mentioned. So I went 3-0 last week, improved to 11-1 on the season. And that puts me at 223 wins and 83 losses in my time at USC since I've started going to games. And as for this week, my plans are I'll be going to the Big Ten home opener for women's volleyball, as well as the football game for Parents Weekend. My parents are actually coming up for that one, so I'm definitely looking forward to seeing them. Spending some time with them tailgating and just having a good time. I think it's going to be a great game, obviously. This whole weekend will be great. And I think this is definitely going to be a really fun weekend of just seeing kind of how this whole Big Ten thing is going to go. And I think Trojans a lot of teams are getting some tests. So we'll see how soccer does, how women's volleyball does, how football continues to do. So we'll see how all that plays out. And I think overall, it's going to be a really exciting time. I think this Big Ten era has just definitely been really exciting. You're seeing great matches, just matchups. And I think obviously going back to football real quick, I think that football game was just one of the most physical matches I've games of football I've ever watched. You just saw, and I think you just saw Michigan's defense just showing like it's just like this is how it is here, and that they play solid defense. That's just kind of what USC is going to have to adjust to for life. I think we can. I don't know if he be quite as physical as it was. I don't know if USC is going to get team is going to get as like physically punished by Wisconsin as they were against Michigan, but I think it'll be pretty darn close. And I think we saw why when they played Michigan. That's just the style of play in the Big Ten. So USC is definitely going to adjust, and it's definitely obviously a step up from kind of how the Pac-12 was all offense, kind of, sort of more nimble, kind of more geared towards the offense. Whereas this, it's like it's defense. It's like going to win you games. And I think that was why we saw Michigan win the national championship last year. Yes, Jim Harbaugh is gone, but obviously Sharon Moore clearly learned from him and has helped implement that defense, especially bringing in Wink Martindale on defense to help kind of implement that scheme. So it's definitely going to be really interesting to see what the Trojans bring. We'll kind of definitely interested to see kind of how Grinch's defense matches up against Miller Moss and the Trojans offense, which has been really well so far this season. Aside from that, so overall, that's what I'll be doing this week, and I think it's definitely going to be a fun weekend for Trojan athletics. Definitely make it out what you can. If you see me at anything, obviously come say hi, talk. Obviously, can't wait to keep doing this. Like I said, I'll be at volleyball on Friday and football on Saturday. So those will be my two things kind of for this parents weekend, kind of Big Ten home opener weekends as we're seeing. So it's going to be definitely a great time. Thanks again, everybody, for tuning in. Make sure to follow me on social media at CrashLit on all platforms to see what's going on, get updates on when episodes are coming out. So looking forward to being back with you and talking about everything next week. Have a good one and fight on.